The massive Imperial warship cut through the darkness of space like a silver blade. Its hull gleamed under the light of distant stars as it approached the green and blue planet below. Inside the ship, Captain Deho stood on the bridge with his arms crossed behind his back. His dark eyes studied the world through the main viewing screen. "Kepler 442b looks peaceful from up here," said Lieutenant Jinwoo, standing beside his captain. "Hard to believe the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy live down there." Deho smiled coldly. "That is exactly why we are here. The albino tigers have avoided us for too long. Today, the Valtharian Empire claims its greatest hunting prize." The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Everyone knew this was not just another mission. For 300 years, the Valtharian Empire had ruled 12 star systems. They considered themselves the strongest species in the galaxy. Other races either served them or died. But the albino tigers had always escaped their reach. These were not ordinary tigers. Each one was the size of an earth elephant, with pure white fur that seemed to glow in moonlight. Their blue eyes held intelligence that made even Imperial scientists uncomfortable. Most frightening of all, they could disappear and reappear through solid matter for short moments. No one understood how they did this. "Sir, we have located the main tiger territory," reported Communications Officer Sujin. "Long-range scanners show at least 20 adults in the northern jungle region." Deho rubbed his hands together. "Perfect. Prepare the hunting shuttles. I want 6 teams of 3 hunters each, full battle armor and energy weapons only. We need to keep the pelts intact." While the Imperial ship prepared for its hunt, far above in a small mining station, a human named Minho sat alone in his observation room. The station orbited the planet quietly, its purpose to monitor mineral deposits and weather patterns. Minho had been working here for 2 years, and in that time, he had become fascinated by the creatures living on the world below. Minho was not supposed to study the tigers. Humans were considered a lesser species by the Empire. They were allowed to work as miners, mechanics, and laborers, but nothing more. Scientific research was forbidden to them. Still, Minho could not help himself. During his long shifts, he would watch the satellite feeds and observe the magnificent white tigers moving through their jungle home. He had learned much about them just by watching. The tigers lived in family groups. They hunted together and protected their young fiercely. They even seemed to play games with each other, chasing and wrestling like house cats. Minho had given names to the ones he saw most often. The largest male he called Snowfang because of his impressive white teeth. "Computer, show me the northern sector feeds," Minho said to his workstation. The screens lit up with images from various satellites. Below, the jungle stretched for thousands of miles. Rivers cut through the green landscape like silver ribbons. And there, moving between the trees with impossible grace, were the albino tigers. Minho counted 7 adults and 3 cubs in today's group. They moved in a line, with the largest male leading and the females protecting the young ones. Their white fur made them easy to spot against the green jungle, but somehow Minho knew they could hide when they wanted to. A warning alarm suddenly filled his small station. Minho quickly switched to the tactical display. His heart sank when he saw what was approaching the planet. "Imperial hunting vessel," he whispered. "No, no, no." Minho had heard stories about Imperial hunting expeditions. They did not hunt for food or survival. They hunted for sport and trophies. The rarer the creature, the more they wanted to kill it. The albino tigers were probably the rarest creatures in the galaxy. Down on the Imperial ship, the hunting teams were making final preparations. Each hunter wore thick armor that could stop most natural weapons. Their energy rifles could burn through solid rock. They carried tracking devices, medical supplies, and portable shields. "Remember," Captain Deho addressed his hunters in the shuttle bay, "these are not ordinary animals. The tigers can phase through solid matter for a few seconds at a time. They are also highly intelligent. Do not underestimate them." Sergeant Borum, a veteran hunter with scars across her face, raised her hand. "Sir, what if they try to communicate with us?" Deho laughed harshly. "Animals do not communicate, Sergeant. They may be clever, but they are still just beasts. We are the Valtharian Empire. We are the apex predators of this galaxy. The other hunters nodded and made sounds of agreement. They had hunted dangerous creatures on dozens of worlds. None had ever been a real challenge for Imperial technology and training. Teams 1 through 3 will land in the northern jungle, Daiho continued. Teams 4 through 6 will approach from the south. We will drive the tigers toward the center and trap them in the valley. Quick, clean kills. I want every pelt perfect for the Imperial Trophy Hall. As the shuttles prepared to launch, Minho watched helplessly from his station above. He wanted to warn the tigers somehow, but he had no way to communicate with them. Humans were not allowed to interfere with Imperial operations. If they caught him trying to help, they would execute him. Still, Minho began recording everything. Maybe someday this footage would be important. Maybe someone would need to know what really happened here. The first shuttle launched from the Imperial ship with a bright flash of engine fire, then the second and the third. Soon all 6 hunting teams were racing toward the planet's surface. They moved in perfect formation, their pilots expert at combat landings. But the planet below was not as peaceful as it looked from space. In the deep jungle, something had noticed the approaching ships. Blue eyes opened in the shadows. White forms moved silently between the trees. The albino tigers had survived for millions of years by being clever, careful, and very, very dangerous. Snowfang, the great white male, lifted his massive head and sniffed the air. He smelled something new coming from the sky, something that carried the scent of metal and death. His lips pulled back to show teeth as long as human fingers. Around him, the other tigers began to move. The hunt was about to begin, but it would not go the way the Empire expected. The first Imperial shuttle hit the jungle canopy with a thunderous crash. Trees exploded into splinters as the heavy craft plowed through branches and vines before slamming into the ground. Captain Daiho pulled himself from the wreckage, blood running down his forehead. "Status report," he barked into his communication device. Static filled his ears. The crash had damaged their long-range communications. Around him, his hunting team slowly emerged from the twisted metal. Lieutenant Jinwoo had a broken arm and Corporal Hyunwoo was limping badly. "Sir, the other shuttles," Jinwoo said, pointing upward through the hole they had made in the canopy. "I can see smoke from at least 2 more crash sites," Daiho cursed, under his breath. The planet's atmosphere had been more turbulent than their sensors indicated. A massive storm system had appeared from nowhere, separating their hunting formation. Now his perfectly planned operation was scattered across hundreds of miles of hostile jungle. "We continue the mission," Daiho decided. "We are Imperial hunters. A little rough landing will not stop us." But they were not alone in the jungle. From the shadows between massive trees, blue eyes watched the strange metal creatures that had fallen from the sky. The albino tigers had been tracking the shuttles since they entered the atmosphere. Now they moved silently through their domain, studying these new arrivals. Snowfang crouched on a thick branch 30 feet above the crash site. His massive body remained perfectly still as he observed the creatures below. They moved awkwardly through the jungle, making noise and leaving obvious trails. They carried strange metal objects that smelled of danger. The great tiger had lived for over 50 years. He had seen many predators come and go. But these creatures were different. They moved with purpose like hunters, and they had come from the sky in metal shells, which meant they were not natural to this world. A low rumble came from deep in Snowfang's chest. It was a sound too low for human ears to hear, but every tiger within 20 miles felt it. The message was simple. Strangers in the territory, possibly dangerous, observe and report. 3 miles to the south, Sergeant Borum's team had also crashed. Unlike Daiho's group, they had landed in a swamp. The humid air made breathing difficult, and strange insects swarmed around them constantly. Private Youngho slapped at something biting his neck and came away with blood on his hand. "This place is a nightmare," he muttered. Sergeant Borum ignored his complaints. She was studying tracks, in the mud near their landing site. The prints were huge, larger than any earth tiger, and they were fresh. "We have company," she announced to her team. "Everyone stay alert. Safety off on all weapons." What she did not know was that they had been watched since the moment they crashed. A female tiger named Moon Whisper by Minho's private naming system had been drinking from the swamp when their shuttle screamed overhead. Now she lay hidden in tall grass, studying these metal-covered creatures. Moon Whisper was smaller than Snowfang, but she was faster and more cunning. She had cubs hidden in a den nearby, and these strangers were too close to her young. Her maternal instincts told her to drive them away or kill them. High above the planet, Minho watched the disaster unfold on his satellite feeds. All 6 Imperial shuttles had crashed in different locations across the jungle. The hunting teams were scattered, separated, and in immediate danger. They have no idea what they are walking into, Minho said to himself. For 2 years, he had observed the tigers. He knew they were not just intelligent animals. They communicated with each other across vast distances. They planned and coordinated their actions. They had a complex social structure with clear leadership and roles. Most importantly, they were territorial. The arrival of armed strangers would trigger their defensive instincts. Minho switched between satellite views, trying to track both the Imperial teams and the tiger movements. What he saw made his blood run cold. The tigers were not running away from the crashed shuttles. They were moving toward them. In the northern sector, Captain Deho's team had begun hiking toward higher ground, hoping to establish communications with their ship. They moved in standard military formation, with scouts ahead and weapons ready. But their training was for fighting other intelligent species with technology. Nothing had prepared them for this environment. The jungle was alive around them. Birds called warnings from the treetops. Monkeys chattered and threw branches. Insects buzzed in clouds so thick they blocked vision, and somewhere behind them something large was following. "Sir," whispered Corporal Hyunwoo, "I keep hearing something moving in the brush behind us." Deho stopped and listened. At first, he heard only jungle sounds. Then, very faintly, he caught it, the soft padding of enormous paws on jungle floor. Something was stalking them. "Battle formation," he ordered quietly. "Whatever it is, we will be ready. But you cannot fight what you cannot see." The tigers had perfected the art of jungle hunting over millions of years. They knew how to use shadows, how to move without sound, how to appear and disappear like ghosts. Snowfang had called 2 younger males to help him track the metal creatures. They spread out in a wide circle, always staying hidden, always watching. The hunt had begun, but not the way the Imperials expected. To the south, Sergeant Borum's team had started moving through the swamp when Private Young-ho suddenly stopped walking. His eyes went wide with terror as he stared at something behind his teammates. "Sergeant," he whispered, "do not move. Do not turn around." Borum slowly turned her head. 20 feet away, a massive white tiger stood in the shallow water. Its blue eyes stared directly at her with an intelligence that made her skin crawl. The creature was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Easy," she breathed. "Nobody move. It might go away." But Moon Whisper had no intention of going away. These strangers were in her territory, near her cubs. She took one slow step forward, water barely rippling around her massive paws. The standoff lasted only seconds before Private Young-ho panicked and fired his energy rifle. The bright beam cut through the humid air, but it hit only empty space. The tiger had vanished. "Where did it go?" Young-ho shouted, spinning in circles with his weapon ready. His answer came from above. Moon Whisper had used her phasing ability to leap through a fallen log and land on a thick branch overhead. Now she crouched directly above them, muscles coiled for attack. The hunt had truly begun. Minho had made a decision that would change his life forever. He could not watch the tigers and humans destroy each other from orbit any longer. His small shuttle was not designed for atmospheric entry, but it was his only chance to reach the planet surface. "Computer, prepare shuttle for emergency launch," he commanded. "Warning, atmospheric entry not recommended for this vessel type." The computer responded in its calm voice. "Override safety protocols. Authorization Minho 77. Alpha." The shuttle bay doors opened to reveal the green and blue planet below. Storm clouds swirled across the jungle surface where the Imperial teams had crashed. Minho strapped himself into the pilot seat and fired the engines. The descent was rougher than anything he had experienced. The shuttle shook violently as it hit the atmosphere. Warning lights flashed red across his control panel. Outside the windows, the hull began to glow from heat friction. "Come on," Minho whispered, fighting to keep the shuttle stable. "Just get me down there in one piece." But the storm system that had destroyed the Imperial shuttles was still active. Lightning struck his small craft just as he cleared the cloud layer. All his instruments went dead. The shuttle spun out of control and crashed into the jungle canopy, with a tremendous crack of breaking wood. When Minho woke up, his head was pounding and his left shoulder felt like it was on fire. The shuttle had come to rest against a massive tree trunk. Twisted metal and broken glass surrounded him. He was alive, but barely. He managed to crawl out of the wreckage and take stock of his situation. His communication equipment was destroyed. His food supplies were scattered. But his basic survival gear had survived the crash, including his medical kit and water purification tablets. "Well, Minho," he said to himself, "you wanted to study the tigers up close. Be careful what you wish for." What he did not know was that his crash had been observed. Snowfang had been tracking Captain Daho's team when he heard the sound of another metal shell falling from the sky. This one had crashed only 2 miles from where the great tiger waited in ambush. But when Snowfang approached the new crash site, he found something unexpected. This creature was different from the others. It moved slowly, carefully. It carried no weapons, and when it found a young tiger caught in one of the Imperial hunting traps, it did something that shocked the watching tiger patriarch. Minho had been walking carefully through the jungle, trying to find higher ground for a signal, when he heard a soft whimpering sound. Following the noise, he discovered a tiger cub no bigger than a house cat. Its pure white fur was stained with blood, and its rear leg was caught in a metal snare. "Oh, you poor little thing," Minho whispered, approaching slowly. The cub hissed and tried to back away, but the trap held it tight. Fear filled its blue eyes as this strange creature came closer, but Minho moved very slowly, talking in a soft voice. "It is okay. I want to help you. That trap is hurting you." He knelt down beside the frightened cub and carefully examined the snare. It was an Imperial design, meant to hold large animals without killing them. The metal wire was cutting into the cub's leg, but the wound was not too deep. "This is going to hurt a little," Minho said gently, "but then you will be free." Working with infinite patience, he managed to loosen the wire and free the cub's leg. Then he used his medical kit to clean the wound and apply a healing gel. The whole time, the cub watched him with curious eyes. When Minho finished, he sat back and smiled. "There you go, little one. Run home to your family." But the cub did not run away. Instead, it limped closer and sniffed at Minho's hand. Then, to his amazement, it began to purr. The sound was much deeper than a house cat, more like a small motor running. From the shadows 30 feet away, Snowfang watched this entire encounter with growing amazement. He had lived long enough to understand many things about different creatures, but he had never seen anything like this. The metal creature had helped one of his kind with no expectation of reward. It had shown gentleness and care. The great tiger made a decision that would echo through the galaxy. That night, as Minho made a small camp beside a stream, he became aware that he was being watched. He could feel eyes on him from the darkness beyond his small fire. But strangely, he was not afraid. Something about the presence felt curious rather than threatening. "I know you are out there," he said quietly to the jungle. "I am not here to hurt anyone. I just want to understand." A soft rustling came from the bushes to his left. Then, moving with impossible grace for something so large, Snowfang stepped into the firelight. Minho's breath caught in his throat. The tiger was even more magnificent up close than in his satellite observations. Its white fur seemed to glow in the firelight, and its blue eyes held an intelligence that was almost human. For long moments, they stared at each other across the small clearing. Minho remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. The tiger studied him with obvious curiosity, its great head tilted slightly to one side. Then Snowfang did something unprecedented. He lay down beside the fire, his massive body relaxed but alert. His presence said clearly that this strange creature was under his protection. 20 miles away, Captain Deho was having a very different night. His team had lost 3 hunters to the jungle. 2 had simply vanished during the day's march, leaving only scattered equipment and bloodstains. The 3rd had fallen into a pit trap hidden beneath leaves and vines. "Sir, we need to call for extraction," Lieutenant Jinwoo said, nervously. "This mission has gone wrong." Deho's face was hard with anger. "We are Imperial hunters. We do not retreat from animals." But even as he spoke, he could hear them out there in the darkness. Soft padding of enormous paws, the occasional flash of blue eyes in the shadows, low rumbles that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The hunters had become the hunted. "Sir," Corporal Hyunwoo whispered urgently. "Movement at 3 o'clock." Deho spun with his weapon ready, but saw nothing except jungle shadows. Whatever was out there had vanished again. "They are playing with us," he realized with growing fury. "The animals are toying with us like we are prey." Back at the stream, Minho was experiencing something wonderful. As the night deepened, more tigers began to appear at the edge of his camp. They came one by one, stepping carefully into the firelight, to observe this strange new creature that their patriarch had accepted. Minho counted 7 adults and the cub he had helped earlier. They formed a loose circle around his fire, some lying down, others sitting like enormous house cats. Their presence should have terrified him, but instead he felt a deep sense of peace. "You are not just animals, are you?" he said softly. "You are people, different from humans, but people all the same." Snowfang's deep purr filled the night air, and one by one the other tigers joined in. The sound vibrated through Minho's chest, and he felt something he had never experienced before. He was truly welcome here. For the first time in galactic history, a human had been accepted into a tiger pride. 3 days had passed since Minho's acceptance into the tiger pride. During that time, he had learned more about these magnificent creatures than all his years of satellite observation. They had names for each other, expressed through combinations of low rumbles and body language. They shared food and took turns watching over the cubs. Most amazing of all, they seemed to understand that he was trying to communicate with them. Snowfang had become his constant companion. The great tiger would hunt during the day, always returning with enough meat to share. At night, he would curl up beside Minho's sleeping area, his massive body providing warmth and protection. Minho discovered that the tiger's purring had remarkable effects. When he had injured his shoulder in the crash, the deep vibrations from Snowfang's purr seemed to speed his healing. The pain faded faster than it should have, and the swelling went down in hours instead of days. "You are amazing," Minho told the tiger as they rested beside the stream. "Your people have abilities that our scientists never imagined." Snowfang tilted his great head and made a soft chuffing sound that Minho had learned meant curiosity or question. "My people," Minho said, touching his chest. "Humans. We live far from here among the stars. Most of us are workers for the Empire, but some of us dream of understanding creatures like you." The tiger's blue ears flicked with interest. He had observed that this creature made many different sounds with its mouth, and some of them seemed to have specific meanings. Their peaceful morning was interrupted by the sound of crashing through the jungle. Someone was approaching their clearing, moving loudly and carelessly through the undergrowth. Snowfang was on his feet instantly, a low growl rumbling from his throat. The other tigers melted back into the jungle shadows, but Minho could sense they remained close by. Captain Deho burst into the clearing with his energy rifle raised. His uniform was torn and dirty, his face streaked with mud and blood. Behind him stumbled Sergeant Borum, the only other survivor from all 6 hunting teams. "You," Deho snarled when he saw Minho. "Human, what are you doing on this planet without authorization?" Minho slowly stood up, keeping his hands visible and non-threatening. "My name is Minho. I was monitoring the mineral surveys when I saw your ship's crash. I came down to help." "Help?" Deho laughed harshly. "You were supposed to report the crash and wait for rescue, not come down here yourself." Do you know how many good Imperial hunters have died because of these monsters? Snowfang's growl deepened at the word monsters. The tiger understood tone even if he did not know the exact meaning. They are not monsters, Minho said quietly. They are intelligent beings defending their territory. If you had come in peace, instead of as hunters. Silence! Daiho raised his rifle toward Minho. You will guide us to a safe landing zone where we can signal for extraction. That is an order. I cannot do that, Minho replied. These tigers have accepted me as part of their family. I will not betray their trust. Sergeant Borum stepped forward nervously. Sir, that big white one behind the human. It has been watching us since we entered the clearing, and I think there are others in the trees. Indeed, Snowfang had positioned himself protectively behind Minho. His massive form radiated controlled power as he stared at the two-armed figures. His message was clear. Threaten the human, and face the consequences, you see? Daiho spat. This is what happens when lesser species try to think for themselves. You have probably been their prisoner all this time, too stupid to realize it. I am not a prisoner, Minho said firmly. I am their friend. To prove his point, he turned and placed his hand gently on Snowfang's massive head. The tiger's purr immediately filled the clearing, a sound so deep it vibrated through the ground beneath their feet. Captain Daiho's face twisted with rage and disbelief. Impossible. Animals do not form friendships with other species. You are deluded. Then explain this, Minho said. He made a series of soft sounds he had learned, accompanied by hand gestures. Snowfang responded with his own rumbling call. Within moments, 6 more adult tigers emerged from the jungle around the clearing. They moved with silent grace, forming a loose circle around the 3 humans. Their blue eyes reflected intelligence and purpose. Sergeant Borum raised her weapon with shaking hands. Sir, we are surrounded. Do not shoot, Minho said urgently. They will not hurt us unless we threaten them. But Captain Daiho had reached the end of his patience. The humiliation of losing his entire hunting party to animals was more than his imperial pride could bear. He aimed his rifle at Snowfang. I will kill this beast and then you will guide us out of here. No. Minho stepped between the rifle and the tiger. Daiho pulled the trigger without hesitation. The energy beam struck Minho in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to the ground. Pain exploded through his body as the smell of burned flesh filled the air. That was just a warning, Daiho said coldly. The next shot goes through your heart unless you obey. But he had made a fatal mistake. The tigers had accepted Minho as part of their pride. An attack on him was an attack on all of them. Snowfang's roar shook the entire jungle. It was a sound of pure rage, the cry of a patriarch defending his family. The other tigers responded instantly, their own voices joining the terrible chorus. Sergeant Borum panicked and opened fire wildly. Her energy beams cut through the air, one of them striking a young female tiger in the side. The wounded tiger screamed and fell, dark blood staining her white fur. That was the final provocation. The tigers attacked with coordinated precision that would have impressed military strategists. They did not charge blindly. Instead, they used their phasing ability to appear and disappear, striking from impossible angles. Sergeant Borum vanished beneath a blur of white fur and flashing claws. Her screams lasted only seconds before the jungle fell silent again. Captain Daiho found himself alone, facing 7 angry tigers and 1 wounded human. His weapon felt useless in his hands as blue eyes stared at him from every direction. Call them off, he demanded, but his voice shook with fear. Minho struggled to sit up, his shoulder burning with pain. I cannot call them off. You killed one of their family. Snowfang approached the terrified Imperial officer slowly. The great tiger's eyes burned with cold intelligence and barely controlled fury. He could have killed Daiho instantly, but instead, he did something more frightening. He lay down beside Minho and began to purr. The deep sound filled the clearing, but now it carried a different meaning. It was not the gentle purr of companionship Minho had learned to love. This was something else entirely. A healing song for a wounded friend and a promise of protection. As the purring vibrations flowed through his injured body, Minho felt his pain begin to fade. The wound was healing faster than should have been possible. Captain Deho watched in growing horror as the human and tiger demonstrated a bond that challenged everything he believed about the natural order of the galaxy. Here was a lesser species being protected and healed by creatures that were supposed to be mindless animals. The sound of approaching aircraft filled the air above the jungle canopy. The Imperial rescue fleet had finally arrived. But what they would find in this clearing would change the galaxy forever. Admiral Sunho stood in the command center of the Imperial rescue fleet, studying the reports from the surface with growing disbelief. 6 hunting teams destroyed. Only 1 survivor found, raving about impossible alliances between humans and alien predators. And now their sensors showed something that made no sense at all. Tactical officer, confirm these readings, he ordered. Confirmed, sir. We have 1 human life sign in the northern jungle sector, surrounded by approximately 20 large alien creatures. The human appears to be unrestrained and moving freely among them. Admiral Sunho rubbed his temples. In 30 years of Imperial service, he had never encountered a situation like this. Prepare a rescue team. Full battle armor and heavy weapons. If the human is somehow being controlled by these creatures, we need to be ready for anything. But, down in the jungle clearing, something remarkable was happening. Minho had spent the morning teaching Captain Deho basic tiger communication through necessity. The Imperial officer was terrified and convinced he would be killed at any moment. But the tigers had made no aggressive moves since the rescue aircraft appeared. They are curious about the ships, Minho explained. His shoulder almost completely healed thanks to Snowfang's purring therapy. They understand that more of your people are coming. Deho shook his head stubbornly. Animals cannot understand. Aircraft or military tactics, you are imagining things. To prove his point, Minho made a series of soft rumbles and gestures to Snowfang. The great tiger responded with his own sounds, then lifted his massive head toward the sky. Within seconds, every tiger in the clearing was looking upward. I told him that metal birds are bringing more of your people, Minho said simply. He is deciding whether they are friends or enemies. Impossible, Deho whispered. But his voice lacked conviction. When the Imperial rescue team landed in their heavily armed shuttle, they found a scene that would be talked about in military academies. For generations, a human sat peacefully beside a massive white tiger, while other tigers lounged around the clearing like oversized house cats. The only sign of violence was the torn uniform and haunted expression of Captain Deho. Lieutenant Commander Tae-hoon led the rescue team out of the shuttle with weapons ready. Human Minho, step away from the hostile creatures immediately. They are not hostile, Minho replied calmly. They are protecting me. To demonstrate, he stood up and walked among the tigers, touching their heads gently and speaking to them in their own rumbling language. The massive predators responded with purrs and gentle nudges, treating him like a beloved family member. The rescue team stared in amazement. Everything they had been taught about species hierarchy and animal behavior was being challenged before their eyes. Sir, whispered Sergeant G1, the big white one is watching our every move. It is like it understands what we are. Lieutenant Commander Tae-hoon activated his communication device. Admiral Sunho, you need to see this for yourself. An hour. Later, Admiral Sunho stood in the jungle clearing with a full diplomatic escort. He was a practical man who had risen through Imperial ranks by making smart decisions under pressure. What he saw here would require the smartest decision of his career. Minho had spent the time preparing both sides for this meeting. He explained to the tigers that these newcomers were leaders among his kind, come to understand the situation. He told the Imperial officers that the tigers were intelligent beings with their own culture and communication system. Demonstrate, Admiral Sunho said simply. Minho began with basic concepts. He gestured to himself and made a sound the tigers had learned meant friend. Snowfang responded with his own rumble and touched Minho gently with his massive paw. Then, Minho pointed to the Imperial officers and made a questioning sound. What should we call these newcomers? Snowfang studied the armed figures for a long moment. Then he made a complex series of rumbles that clearly distinguished between the peaceful newcomers and the aggressive hunters from before. He is asking, if you come in peace or for war, Minho translated. The tigers understand the difference. Admiral Sunho felt a chill run down his spine. These creatures were not just intelligent. They were capable of complex political concepts like peace treaties and diplomatic negotiations. Tell them we come to understand, he said carefully. The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours and changed the course of galactic history. Through Minho's translation, the tigers explained their perspective on the hunting expeditions. They had been forced to defend their territory and young from what they perceived as an invasion by metal predators. The Imperial officers learned that the tigers had names for themselves, family structures, and even rudimentary technology adapted to their physical forms. They used their phasing ability not just for hunting, but for construction, creating spaces within solid rock for their dens. Most shocking of all, they had been trying to communicate with the Empire for decades through the positioning of objects and markings that Imperial surveys had dismissed as random animal behavior. They have been attempting first contact, Admiral Sunho realized with growing amazement. We ignored them because we assumed they were not intelligent. Captain Deho, who had remained silent throughout the demonstration, finally spoke up. This changes nothing. They are still just animals. Clever animals, but animals nonetheless. Snowfang's response needed no translation. The great tiger fixed Deho with a stare of such obvious contempt and intelligence that several Imperial officers stepped backward involuntarily. I think, Admiral Sunho said quietly, that we are the ones who have been acting like animals. The political implications were staggering. If tigers were intelligent beings, then the hunting expeditions had been genocide, not sport. If a human could communicate with them when Imperials could not, what did that say about supposed species superiority? Admiral Sunho made his decision with the weight of history on his shoulders. By my authority as Fleet Admiral of the Valtharian Empire, I hereby declare Kepler 442b a protected world under Imperial Conservation Statute 7. All hunting activities are immediately suspended. Human Minho will be appointed as official liaison between the Empire and the indigenous population. The words hung in the jungle air like a thunderclap. For the first time in Imperial history, a human had been given diplomatic status equal to Imperial citizens. Captain Deho's face turned purple with rage. You cannot give authority to a lesser species. The Imperial Council will never approve this. The Imperial Council will approve it, Admiral Sunho said firmly, because I am sending them full documentation of what we have discovered here, including video evidence of interspecies communication and the intelligence of the native population. He turned to Minho, who was still sitting beside Snowfang with tears streaming down his face. Will you accept this position? Minho looked at the great tiger who had become his dearest friend. Snowfang's purr filled the clearing, and somehow Minho knew it meant approval and encouragement. I accept, he said simply. 6 months later, the first interspecies research station was completed in the northern jungle of Kepler 442b. Minho worked alongside tiger engineers who used their phasing abilities to create structures that were part building, part cave, and completely revolutionary. Imperial hunting expeditions across the galaxy were being cancelled as word spread of the intelligence discovered on Kepler 442b. Other animal species were being reassessed, and some shocking discoveries were being made. But more importantly, humanity had taken its first step toward true equality in the galactic community, not through conquest or technology, but through the simple act of showing compassion to another living being. Minho stood on the observation deck of his research station, watching Snowfang's cubs play in the clearing below. The great tiger himself lay nearby, his rumbling purr a constant source of comfort and healing. Who would have thought, Minho said to his friend, that the key to changing the galaxy was simply learning to listen? Snowfang's blue eyes reflected ancient wisdom as he rumbled his agreement. In the distance, other tigers moved through their jungle home with new confidence. They were no longer prey hiding from predators. They were citizens of a galaxy that was finally learning to recognize intelligence in all its forms. The hunt was over. The real journey was just beginning.